My name is Lavinia Greenlaw, and I'm the chair of this year's T.S. Eliot judging panel. And I'm going to start with a poem by T.S. Eliot, part 5 of East Coker. So here I am in the middle way, having had 20 years largely wasted, the years of l'entre-deux-guerres, trying to learn to use words, and every attempt is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure, because one has only learnt to get the better of words, for the thing one no longer has to say, or the way in which one is no longer disposed to say it. And so each venture is a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate, with shabby equipment always deteriorating in the general mess of imprecision of feeling, undisciplined squads of emotion. And what there is to conquer by strength or submission has already been discovered once or twice or several times by men whom one cannot hope to emulate. But there is no competition. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost and found and lost again and again, and now under conditions that seem unpropitious. But perhaps neither gain nor loss. For us, there is only the trying. The rest is not our business.
Thank you very much, Lavinia. I'm just gesturing to where I think Lavinia might be. My name's Ian McMillan. I'm your genial host for tonight's T.S. Eliot Prize readings and the awarding of the prize. Usually, as you know, we're all sat in the wonderful Royal Festival Hall at the South Bank Centre, and we're a crowd, we're a mob. Tonight, it's just us on our own in our rooms. But usually, you read poems on your own in your room, but as you read them, you're surrounded by everybody who's also reading that book and also by the poet. So let's pretend that we are a crowd. We really are a crowd in this most extraordinary of years. So tonight we've got the 10 shortlisted poets who are going to read for 5 poetry minutes. Usually we have an interval. We're not having an interval tonight. If you want to pretend you're having one by leaning over and getting a cup of tea, feel free to do that. Each shortlisted poet wins £1,500. The winning poet gets £25,000, which is fantastic. It's a wonderful thing because it kind of frees you from having to do other things and makes you be able to concentrate on writing poems. The Poetry Book Society, which originally administered this prize, was set up by T.S. Eliot and his friends in 1953 to support poets, poetry publishers and readers. And the Poetry Book Society established this prize in 1993 to honour its founding poet. The prize is now run and supported by the T.S. Eliot Foundation. What a fantastic organisation this is. Our first poet is Wayne Holloway Smith. Wayne Holloway Smith is a wonderful poet of the body, like so many poets are on this shortlist. And when I read his poems, I always think it's a bit like a Zoom invitation, because you're sitting there in your room. Wayne's poems arrive as a kind of invitation. And you can see Wayne in his room reading his poems, and you can look across a kind of bridge towards Wayne, and his room looks straight into our room. And somehow, by reading Wayne's extraordinary poems, we are sharing rooms across this bridge. Here are poems of the mind, of the body, of masculinity, of somehow joining ourselves together, which is what we want to do in these times. Wayne Holloway Smith, an extraordinary poet.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm going to read a couple of bits from this long fragmentary poem called Love Minus Love, and put on my glasses. One story goes, a man on his lunch break was hit by a falling baby, falling from a very high window of a building the man was passing on his lunch break. The man saved the baby's life, accidentally getting landed on. The man saved that exact baby's life, accidentally getting landed on 1 exact year later, on his lunch break, breaking the slightly more grown baby falling from the same window's fall, accidentally. The man's name is Joseph Figlock. What is sad is The realization this baby could literally mean anything, but doesn't. It does not. What I don't know is whether that baby, a toddler by now, has fallen a third time, whether he's falling still and at this moment crying out, "Where is Joseph Figlock? I can't see him. Why isn't he here?" "I want you to leave your body now," he tells me. His voice not so much hypnotic as reaching for the hypnotic. But I leave it anyway, sitting in the upright chair of the windowless room for a place higher up that's not quite the windowless room, though I'm aware of my body's particular kind of breathing down there, dressed in my favourite shirt. And somehow up here, I'm dressed in that same shirt, which is, I feel, suddenly becoming very important. Its colour pertaining to a quiet hue of knowing I can't quite explain. And I do not think about the money I have given him, the man who is speaking, but I'm looking instead down on a yellow kitchen in Swindon, upon a tiny remembered body I have found crying or about to cry in little white shorts. And there is carpet streaked with blue, and there is the noise of a terrible thing that is happening, and there is summer outside with its other children. "He doesn't understand, does he?" says the man. "He's so young." And I understand the shirt that he will have to grow through all of the terrible things to fit. I can feel my body now, filling up the space inside its soft and lavender-scented cotton.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Marvellous, marvellous poems. Our next poet is Sasha Dougdale, with a fantastic book, Defamations. For many years, Sasha edited modern poetry in translation, and that is a great grounding for any poet. And it seems to me that when I read Sasha's poems, even though they're in English, they feel like they've been translated. They've been translated from somewhere else. They've been translated from somewhere beyond language into language. Many of the poets this year have written long sequences, and this book has got 2 long sequences in it, one about the artist Eric Gill, one around Homer's Odyssey. And what Sasha does is she makes you believe that somehow these sequences are more than individual poems, more than sequences. They are somehow of themselves. They are sui generis, as they say in poetry. And you make links between the two. You make links between poems at the start of the book and the end of the book. And what this book teaches you is that a book of poems can be anything you want it to be. Marvellous. And always feeling that somehow translated from somewhere else. Sasha Dougdale.
Defamations is a book of 3 parts, 2 longer sequences and a short kind of lyrical interlude between them. The first part is dedicated to the sculptor and letter cutter Eric Gill, and the final part is called Pity Sad. The sequence Pity Sad is based loosely around episodes from the Odyssey and the relationship between the 2 main protagonists, that is Penelope and Odysseus. In my version, I call Odysseus Pity Sad, and the consonants of Pity Sad PTSD are the main focus of the sequence, that is the effects of war and dislocation on the mental health of the protagonists. This particular poem is called Strip Club, and the episode it relates closest to is the one in which Odysseus, who wants to hear the song of the sirens, ties himself to the mast of his boat as the boat passes the place where the sirens live. And the men on the boat seal up their ears with wax so they can't hear the song and they can carry on rowing. But Odysseus listens to the song of the sirens. Strip Club. For hygiene purposes, he's asked to buy fake notes. The rules are he can put them anywhere, and the strippers exchange them later for US dollar. But it's like his eyes are bound, his body trust. He gives the fake notes away, watches his men scrumple them into cleavage and G-string. too much flesh and odour, too much profit and loss for this thinker. He rests his head in his arms on the melamine table, smells disinfectant, sweat, wants to retch. Like that, head down, eyes closed, he hears a voice singing faintly. He can barely hear it through the throb of music. He cups his hands to his ears irritably, listens. It's calling him. It, she, knows him. She's calling him by his name. Who is she? How does she know him? How does she know him like that, from inside him? Like his mother, combing his hair gently. Like Penelope, scratching his back with her small fingers. Like Telemachus, squealing on his shoulders. Like the mourners, singing for his lost soul. Pity sad, find yourself some tenderness. Allow your hand to run itself down my spine. Trace the tattoos, the mermaid on a rock. Give yourself the gift of a shiver. He shivers, begins to lift his head. I see you, and I can't stop my hands. It's not lust, no, it's your own spine thrashing like an eel in the net and wanting relief. I ache to finger it out of the smooth skin, release it to the pelvis like a bony fin, so it waves gently in water, and when you swim to me, it straightens itself, fish limb, unspeaking. He's gazing around now. Now you raise your head. Look at me. Your eyes are cataracts, and the barnacles have grown on your tongue and your teeth. He looks, but it's dark in the club. Do you need your skin now? I ask you to fly here now, my dipper. Watch me unpick your skin, open you, so I too can be free. He gets to his feet, stumbles, he has no money. A bouncer pushes him back into his seat. His men half rise. The voice is gone, but the memory hangs around him like an infection, a shameful infection, an itch. He curdles. He can't think. He can't snap out of it. The virus takes weeks to travel through him.
Sasha Dougdale. Usually, at this point, there's applause for each poet, and each poet has to walk across that long walk. They have to come up from the seats, walk across. So if you want to recreate that while you're watching at home, as I'm talking, just walk across the room and then walk back. We're trying to recreate that. And if you want to clap, feel free. It's often strange clapping on your own, but as I said before, we're all here. So do carry on clapping. As you can see, I'm waving the next book about Sometimes I Never Suffered by Shane Mccray. I said before that a lot of the poets this year are doing long sequences. And also it seems to me that a lot of the poets this year really are reveling in the entire history of poetry. That somehow every poet who's ever written is there listening to them. It is astonishing. And Shane's book does just that. It's got long sequences in it. It's got a breadth and a depth of understanding of how to write a sequence. And I was once in a workshop and somebody who had a cardigan on said to me, well, it's all a bit modern, isn't it? And actually, this is a bit modern, but also it's a bit historical too. Shane uses the tools of poetry from way, way back in history and applies them with a searchlight mind to what's happening now in America and all over the world. So it is all modern, isn't it? But also it's all ancient. Shane Mccray, modern and ancient at the same time.
This is the hastily assembled angel at the gate. The hastily assembled angel sits behind the gate and doesn't watch the gate. He watches the expressions on the faces of the dozen archers posted on the gate, but only one archer, and only when he glances at the archer next to him. Nervously, the young archer turns his head to glance at the older archer, middle-aged, who only looks ahead. The hastily assembled angel wonders who it was who said, "In the midst of life, we are in death." He has heard many songs, and that was one, although he has heard none of those songs sung, only recited quickly as he was shoved off the cloud, more quickly than a human mind could comprehend, recited as 10,000 other things were shouted, all at once by 10,000 other angels, all of whom heard music he will never hear. He hears a scream and he is back at the gate, behind the gate, and what had he been doing, he wonders, as he sees a young man falling. He stands and folds his folding metal chair. This is the hastily assembled angel considers the lives of dogs and of people. The hastily assembled angel wanders and has wandered through centuries of cities and countries and millennia of cities and countries and of women and of men. There's no hurry now, though he was hurriedly once brought to being, and bears the scars of that, though slowly in the earth. Though slowly he eventually began to wonder what the hurry had been for, and if he could have been a better angel or have done better the job he did if once they'd made him the other angels had allowed him to meet God. For he has been uncertain, as people are uncertain. He has never been as certain as dogs are, who sniff the wind that moves the curtain and see behind the curtain. Mrs. Jim Limber is a nexus at which the many heavens of the multiverse converge. I've been a long time dead without my life, and when it comes back to me in parts, and sometimes I get 2 or 3, or I don't know how many, 15, 40 of the same part, like I lived the same life 60 different ways. I'll see my face, and it's my same face, and I'll be standing where I remember standing once. And if other folks were there, they're there, or some of them, or all of them, but me and some or all of them are wearing different outfits, like the weather in us changed. I think now more than half of life is death, but I can't die enough for all the life I see. This is Jim Limber on the peace which passeth all understanding. First thing I saw that heartened me in heaven was a dead field, first thing beyond the gates. I might have thought if I had seen when I was still alive a field in such a state, I might have wondered whether it had ever been cultivated, whether Negroes had worked it, and if I had, I might have wondered how many died before it got so bad. How many Negroes did it take for the field to die? The deaths of Negroes being the life and death of the earth. I might have asked the dirt. I might have asked the limp brown grass. But there was nothing human in the field. I had never seen that before. Death with no people in it. This is Jim Limber on possibility. What if I had been born in heaven? Do they do that here? I've never seen a baby, but I see full-grown people who I hear the angels whispering. They say they were babies when they died. I always look those people in the eye, but I don't think they see me. And I've never heard them speak. They just walk around in sailor hats with blank looks on their faces. Those white hats with the blue anchors. I sometimes see them walking with their mouths open. The first one I saw like that. And when I tried to talk to him, it was like I wasn't there. So I peeked in his mouth. And in his mouth was the whole sky and stars.
Our next poet is Daisy Farge with her book Life Without Air. Interesting that a couple of the poets on our shortlist this year are also visual artists. And that isn't to say that the visual artist and the poet combine in a kind of writing of very image-filled poems. But my mate Ian, not me, another Ian the artist, he always says that being an artist is simply about thinking, simply about trying to find new ways of thinking. And that's what Daisy does in these poems. She finds new ways of thinking about subjects like the planet and what we're doing to the planet, and about our lives and what our lives are on the planet. It somehow feels that the artist in her is informing the poet in her, and the poet in her is reflecting on the artist in her. And the language is absolutely glorious. I love that word glorious because it feels like it shines. And that's what these poems do. They feel like they shine. If you have a power cut in your house, just hold Daisy's poems up and you'll be able to see. You won't be able to be on Zoom, obviously, because you've had a power cut. But if you hold these up, you will be able to see.
Axiology. I woke up to the grating rack of a mechanical sun. It was ticking on its side just across the street, spun off its great medieval wheels. There was weird light on our sheets from the too soon moon flung up in its place and held there in cuckolded sky. I tried to wake you up, but you only curled in closer, murmured something about an animal with heterochromic eyes. I went to make coffee, and when I came back, you were stood at the window, staring at the sun, naked as a plant, picking green from your nails like the verdigris of God, while the blind sky screeched on its broken axis, and the puce moon clotted with its casserole twin. Life without air. Empedocles was a woman in a sex of natural disasters. Marmoreal she throat, her of the little animals, who gathered in her side vents before she burned. At 14, she stood on the rim of the crater, but could only remember the railings. And when she inhaled clouds of perlite, felt them curdle her blood, becoming thought. Floor is lava, eyes are algae, ash is rock, trying to become air. This is how she came to believe in the oracle of necessity. She wrote of nature and purification in verse, of attic nights and table talk. She wrote that trees are the favoritism of air, and that tall ones lay eggs, the olive and the medlar. She examined her embryos and called the soft parts lambkins. She told everyone her name meant belly, swore she saw best with smoke in her eyes. In the blood are the thoughts, and in the thoughts blended breath. Thus, when Empedocles saw Rhodophyta streaming between her legs in the bath, it was blood on the tongue doxology. Her students had other ideas, handing in essays with OED definitions of soul and discourses on the blackness of water without having once gotten wet. In the feedback sessions, Empedocles endeavoured to be patient. Whenever the valves of the sea peach are plucked by the current, which is the earth sweating its flammable raiment, remember that air is just fire waiting to happen. But her students were tidally fickle, rolling their eyes like any old element. She had wanted to tell them of spume and anoxic waters, of congeries of burnt women waxing bacterial, that for a woman to survive and keep surviving is extremophilia, waiting for language to culture her like agar. When they came for the heretic Empedocles, she was already in her element, discoursing from ash on blood and air, and the reciprocity of the nipple, exhaling with fumarolic dissent that to be in your element is to die in it. Thank you.
If I had the power to anoint poets and make them royal, I would make J.O. Morgan the king of the book-length poem, because that's what he does. His poems aren't simply individual poems. The poems coalesce into a book-length poem, and that's really, really hard to do, and really hard to do properly. But J.O. Morgan does it. Somehow, the space that gives you allows J.O. Morgan to look at each line with greater depth, knowing that it's not going to end soon. Sometimes when you write a poem and it goes to the end of the page, you think, well, I've got to do certain things with this line. With J.O. Morgan, that's not the case, because he knows he's got the whole book to do it in. It's like a kind of marathon, not a sprint approach to poetry, which really does, really does pay dividends. It definitely does. There's a great line in here. How can you tell if this is a soul half full or half empty? That's what he does. He makes you think so hard about things like that. How can you tell if this is a soul half full or half empty? Who knows? But this is a book that really is more than half full. It's full to the very brim.
Hello. I'm going to read from The Martian's Regress, which is a work set many thousands of years or generations into the future, when the human race has abandoned an uninhabitable Earth and has colonized another planet. And the book looks at aspects of ecology, not only how we change the place around us, the habitat in which we live, but how that habitat changes us, for we have to adapt to live within it. The work is told through myths and folk tales and songs, such things that the Martians themselves would know very well, such as we know our old stories very well. And in this particular instance, having colonized the planet without bringing animals with them, because that would be a lot harder to control, they have decided to try to create animals of their own. And it is called The Hopes of the Martian Settlers. In hankering after meat, they made for themselves a fungal mold, it being as good a place as any to begin. They dug a great pit and poured their new soup in. It sloshed and settled, filling the space it was given. They had perfected a foodstuff of vegetable blood, strong black sap with a mineral bite. Along with this, they tossed in every other chemical requisite to their existence. They hoped someday for something planktonic, for nematodes, flatworms, for even the smallest of snails. The mold took all they gave it, greedily, and with it made more mold. In winter, with thermal jackets, they warmed it, keeping it smooth-skinned and supple. In summer, they set up a sprinkler system to hold its crust from cracking in the heat. They hoped for cuttlefish, for jumbo shrimp, for horseshoe crabs, for trilobites, for maybe one plump little beetle. But when the mold gave of itself only mold, they fed down cables and shocked it in its depths. And when the only word it pronounced was mold, they bombarded it with free radicals. They dropped in toxins, opiates, recyclables, waste. They irradiated it. They had hoped for rainbow trout, for strawberry poison frogs, for snapping turtle, limbless skink. They'd hoped, some day, for a clutch of broiler hens. And though the mould preferred to stay simply mould, it took to squirming up the sides of its enclosure. It had a hankering to get away for a while, to spread itself further afield. In a slow bid for freedom, it pushed inwardly to grow up, with baby steps oozed out over the lip of the pit. But when they saw it emerging, and when they saw it was no less mould for all their careful encouragements, they took a blowtorch to it and blasted every last jellied globule down into powdery ashes, and then, just to be certain, blasted the ashes too. After which they dug a new and bigger pit, and began the whole strained process over again.
Our next poet is Natalie Diaz with her book Post-Colonial Love Poem. And in so many contemporary poets these days, the body is the battleground, and the body is also the theatre, and the body is also the sporting arena, and the body is the blank page in the notebook. And Natalie Diaz writes so well about the individual body, two bodies in close proximity, the body of language, the body of history, the body of culture. Natalie is a great poetic celebrant of the body in all these ways. And also she's a great poet of anger, of the anger about the destruction and appropriation of Native American culture. And her poets sing in an angry and beautiful way in her unique voice, celebrating the body in all the different ways you can think of it. Natalie Diaz.
I'll be reading Ode to the Beloved's Hips from Post-Colonial Love Poem. And gracias for having me. Bells are they shaped on the 8th day, silvered percussion in the morning, are the morning, swing, switch, sway, hold the day away a little longer, a little slower, a little easy. Call to me, I wanna rock, I wanna rock, I wanna rock right now. So to them I come, struck dumb, chime blind, tolling with a throat full of Hosanna. How many hours bowed against this infinity of blessed Trinity, communion of pelvis, sacrum, femur, my mouth, terrible angel, everlasting novena, ecstatic devourer. Oh, the places I have laid them, knelt and scooped the amber fast honey from their openness, Muzen Cobb's hidden temple of Tulum, licked smooth the sticky of her hip, heat thrummed Ossa Coxie, lambent slave to Ilium and Ischium, I never tire to shake this wild hive, split with thumb the sweet dripped comb, hot hexagonal hole, dark diamond to its nectar dervished queen, Maynard tongue, come drunk, hum-tranced honey puller, for her hips I am strummed song and succubus. They are the sign, hip, and the cosign, a great book, the body's Bible opened up to its good news gospel. Alleluias, Ave Marias, Madre Mias, ay, 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 Dios míos, and hip, hip, hooray. Cult of Cossacks, culto de cadera, oracle of orgasm, Rorschach's riddle. What do I see? Hips, innominate bone, wishbone, Orpheus bone, transubstantiation bone, hips of bread, wine, wet thighs, say the word and healed I shall be. Bone butterfly, bone wings, bone Ferris wheel, bone basin, bone throne, bone lamp, apparition in the bone grotto, sixth mystery, slicked rosary bead, deme la gracia of a decade in the garden of carmine flora, exile me to the enormous orchard of Alcinous, spiced fruit, laden tree, in paradise me, because God, I am guilty. I am sin frenzied and full of teeth for pear upon apple upon fig. More than all that are your hips. They are a city. They are kingdom. Troy, the hollowed horse, an army of desire. 30 soldiers in the belly, 2 in the mouth. Beloved, your hips are the war. At night your legs, love, are boulevards, leading me beggared and hungry to your candy house, your Baroque mansion. Even when I am late and the tables have been cleared in the kitchen of your hips, let me eat cake. Oh, constellation of pelvic glide, every curve a luster, a star more infinite still, your hips are cosmic, our universe, galactic carousel of burning comets and big, big bangs. Millennium Falcon, let me be your solo. Oh, hot planet, let me circumambulate. Oh, spiral galaxy, I am coming for your dark matter. Along las calles de tus muslos I wander, follow the parade of pulse like a drumline, descend into your Plaza de Toros, hands throbbing miurables, dark isleros, your arched hips, ay, mi torera. Down the long corridor, your wet walls lead me like a traje de luces, all glittered, glowed. I am the animal born to rush your rich red muletas, each breath, each sigh, each groan, a hooked horn of want. My mouth at your inner thigh. Here I must enter you, mi pobre manolete, press and part you like a wound, make the crowd pounding in the grandstand of your iliac crest rise up in you and cheer.
Our next book is How to Wash a Heart by Banu Kapil. And in this extraordinary book, Banu demonstrates, as she says in one line, it's exhausting to be a guest in someone else's home forever. So there's a poetry here about dispossession, about home, about trying to find a home. But somehow you can feel dispossessed by the world, but also you possess it through language. As she says in one of the lines, tell me about your long journey. But she also says, challenging us, she really challenges us. She says, I want to hear what happened afterwards, not before. So these aren't simply poems about long journeys, about exile, about diaspora, about refugees, about asylum seekers. They're also saying, all right, but what are you going to do about it? I want the afterwards. I don't just want the before. Banu Kapil.
How to wash a heart. Like this. It's inky early outside and I'm wearing my knitted scarf like John Betjeman, poet of the British past. I like to go outside straight away and stand in the brisk air. Yesterday, you vanished into those snowflakes like the ragged beast you are. Perhaps I can write here again. A fleeting sense of possibility, K. Keywords, hospitality, stars, jasmine, privacy. You made a space for me in your home for my books and clothes, and I'll never forget that. When your adopted daughter, an Asian refugee, as you described her, came in with her coffee and perched on the end of my cot, I felt so happy and less like a hoax. Showed her how to drink water from the bowls on the windowsill. I don't want to beautify our collective trauma. Your sexual brilliance resided, I sometimes thought, in your ability to say, no matter the external circumstances, I am here. From this place, you gave only this many desiccated fucks about the future. Day by day, you discovered what happiness is. As your guest, I trained myself to beautify our collective trauma. When night fell at last, I turned with a sigh towards the darkness. I am about to squeeze out an egg, you murmured, as you kissed me goodnight. Hold a funeral for the imagination, I thought. To my left is a turquoise door, and to my right, a butcher's table. Above you is a heart beating in the snow. When I describe the set of my play, an environment more vivid to me than the memory of my childhood home, your face turned green. What made you know something was over? The milk in your eyes scared me. In that moment, I understood that you were a wolf capable of devouring my internal organs if I exposed them to view. Sure enough, the image of a heart carved from the body appeared in the next poem you wrote. There's a bright call of fire and cream as I write these words, stretching out these early spring or late winter mornings with coffee and TV. I don't remember the underneath, everything I will miss when I die. It's exhausting to be a guest in somebody else's house forever. Even though the host invites the guest to say whatever it is they want to say, the guest knows that host logic is variable. Prick me and I will cut off the energy to your life. How to wash a heart? Remove it. Animal or ice? The curator's question reveals their power style. If power implies relationship, then here we are, at the part where even if something goes wrong, that's exactly how it's meant to be. Your job is to understand what the feedback is. It's such a pleasure to spend time outside the house. There's nowhere to go with this except begin. To plunge my forearms into the red ice that is already melting in the box.
In Glyn Maxwell's book, How the Hell Are You?, he shows us language as serious play, but also as a kind of, I don't know, existential hopscotch, you might call it. A kind of board game where the stakes are life and death. Glyn makes these extraordinary rhymes, half rhymes, rhythms, repetitions, which can, in lesser hands, be a kind of trick, but they're not. What they are, they're a kind of combination to a safe, that when you open the safe, you find all kinds of answers about how to live your life. Glyn reignites in me a love of form and a love of rhyme and a love of rhythm and a love of those half rhymes where the rhyme kind of echoes some word that you thought was so far away it wouldn't touch, but in fact it does. Glyn Maxwell.
How the hell are you? How the hell are you? Christ, you haven't crossed my mind since all the shit we knew turned into shit we hoped was true. Forget it. Take my arm and tell me. How the hell are you? How the hell am I? Barely know these days, my friend. We get by, but the nights are good. I don't know why. I do know why. Enough of this. Don't, oh my man, don't cry. Sun shines on the square. Whatever's next, whatever fool parades parading there, let's be old fools with not a care, poor visitors from out of town who don't know this was where it all began again. Plaque there where the thing kicked off. Here come the same young men and the same lines. Remember when we, never mind. Huzzah, forever, glory be, amen, etc. Off they go, sunlight glancing off their gear, new world of years ago. You didn't hear me say that though, because I never did. How does your bastard garden grow? Here's a howdy-do. Remember how this couldn't happen, given what we knew, those checks and balances and due process and fair play. Christ Jesus, wink an eye if you remember. I forget. It wasn't true, so why remember anyway? Let's let bygones be. I'm glad we met. It's nice to be reminded something isn't over yet. I just mean you and me, out strolling in the square together, stopping here for tea. Two creatures with no history, who dreamed it might be otherwise, but who the hell were we? Daylight Saving, for Jim Maxwell, 1928 to 2016. Sid, they're considering doing away with daylight saving. I wanted to tell you in one of the fora we wander together, neither one literally here. Anyway, I don't know the reason. The folks of the morning and folks of the evening met at a table and at the same moment rose in agreement, doing away with daylight saving. And nor was I there to say, hold your horses, as you would have said, and so would your father. We three in a line, having doubts at the same time, wasn't to be. No one sat in our places. No one spoke up for the scent of the hedges, our marathon hide and seek going on, and the sun should be set, and we shouldn't be out, and the ribbon of light down the curtains for ages, infinite really, in that there's no ending, anyone's showed me. No one spoke up for the thrill of the way the last shreds of a Sunday clung at the gates like their father was coming to ferry them home. All gone if you look, but no one is looking. No, Sid, they are thinking of doing away with daylight saving. Won't miss the beetling advance of the dark on your boys standing up in our bikes heading home. They won't miss the witches just missing the trees when it's not even 5. For whatever they save, they will lose as they do. It's not going to be time. Who knows why they had daylight saving at all? I'm just glad we had it. I'm sure you explained. You're explaining now, and I'm listening how I have generally listened and always will for the love in a sound. They are doing away with daylight saving. And where shall we meet? Now God, I don't think so, is shutting those windows and locking the house like a yesterday. We shall meet where the light and the clock are askew, and the language has scrambled to say what that's like. And it's thinking it might let the space play the light, and it might let the space play the other thing too, the, what was it called? 2 hands in a ring, and one pointed to there, and one pointed to there. There was its point. Who knows where it went, howls the language again, and goes back to its darning. And back to St. Francis we go, you and I, where we voted that second last time you went out. Won't say how that went. There'll be time better spent and light better shed to go wandering by.
There's a lot of excitement, I reckon, when poems of identity meet poems of lyric, and the two slug it out. And in Ella Frears's poems, that's what happens. Here are poems about being alive in the world now, but here are descriptions of that being alive in the world now that really do leap from the page. Somehow there's a space at the edges of these poems that exemplify that tussle wonderfully between identity and lyric. And they rub against each other, and sparks fly, and a flame catches light. And there's, I'm going to just quote you one of the images, one of the lines, just to show you how her writing does literally catch fire here. Just outside the door, someone's cigarette smokes itself on the ground. What fantastic writing that is. Not just that the cigarette is alight on the ground, someone's cigarette smokes itself on the ground. That's the kind of writing we get from Ella Frears, a kind of writing that's brand new, that's newly minted, but also, like with so many of the poets, tells us what it's like to live in these extraordinary times that we're living through. Ella Frears, the cigarette smokes itself on the ground. That's a kind of earworm of a line that you never forget.
Hi, I'm really excited to be doing this. The film. The sun was shining as we ambled around campus, stopping boys and men and asking them to hit me across the face. They all refused at first, but we told them it was art and necessary, so they slapped me, one after another. I realised I had to harden my eyes, provoke, Each boy did a comedy slap, palm to face, apologised before and after. It was hot and bright. We flirted with the geographer, whose slap was light, his fingers just brushing my cheek, as though turning my face to the side to see my profile. We had about 20 guys on film. My friend's boyfriend turned up, and we asked if he would do it. He kissed her and stood to face me. My friend pressed record and said, "Go." And I was laughing. I'd forgotten to settle my face, my left cheek slightly pink from a day of slapping. I was not ready for his backhand. Quick and strong. A strange noise as though he'd knocked the laugh right off me. A thicker pain than a sting. An immediate loss of breath. For a moment, we were silent, and I looked at my friend whose hand had flown to her cheek, the camera's red light still blinking, and I knew we would never watch the film, that I would feel sick and guilty as long as the bruise lasted, longer, having asked for what wasn't mine. I wish we were all in a room together. I asked him to check the roof, then took the ladder away. All night I enjoyed the lie. Not feeling well, upstairs in bed, but sent his love. I could feel his frustration through the ceiling, so strongly that it was as though my chest were the roof and he was trapped inside. How will we go on after? I thought. How will I end this? He hadn't called for help. Maybe he'd worked out a way down, but I didn't think so. The dinner party was wonderful. As the guests left, I looked up and realised that there was no moon. "Shine, darling," I whispered, and from behind the chimney rose his little head. Thank you.
Will Harris, in his book Rendang, gives us a map of the world, and a map of his world, and a map of our world. And this map that he gives us made me think, well, actually, what if this book was an actual map that you could use to go through your life with? We often use books of poems as a kind of help and as a kind of, I don't know, exemplars of how to use language. But what if you used it literally as a map? You'd go by a river like a loosely sutured wound and smell the pasture of the green room carpet. And I think you could take this book, use it as a map, and you'd find something that you were looking for in terms of what poetry can do. But also you'd find extraordinary things that you never knew. You really never knew you were looking for. As he says, I love these lines, thoughtful as moss or black coffee or as the screen of a dead phone. That's what eyes look like when you really look at them. And in this map, that's what you do. You end up looking at the contours of living itself. Will Harris.
I'm going to read from Rendang. Rended, rendezvous, rendezvousing. A freshly mown lawn, a stack of banknotes, a cartoon frog, a row of pines, an unripe mango, a septic wound. I saw the glen beside the tall elm tree where the sweetbriar smells so sweet, then the lane in Devon where my dad grew up, and the river in Riau where my mum played. It was blue and yellow mixed, like Howard Hodgkin's version of a Bombay sunset or pistachio ice cream, a jade statue of the Buddha. I remembered being asked, forced to give my favourite colour by a teacher. Why did it matter? Which was the colour of my favourite Power Ranger, of the knight beheaded by Gawain, of the girdle given to him by Lady Bertolac, and chose the same again. I want to call her closed lids buds, because shut they look like petals tucked away, which could at any moment bud. At her wake, She asked for pearls to be placed inside her nostrils and between her lips and on her lids to light her to the afterlife and stop her eyes from growing in this world again. In April, children chased each other around the garden. I thought of the white jumper and the black hood worn by hangmen to hide the world and keep its wearer hidden, to denote sin and keep it out. The next morning, in the breakfast queue, the man taking room numbers asked why I was in town. I said there was a poetry reading. That's odd, he said, and moved on to a children's writer. At Leeds, a kid was hanging by the barriers. The station manager jogged towards him. I asked Kamal what he was doing, being a little rascal. The kid made to walk away before spinning back, then jumped the barrier and ran. Run, jump, run, run, run. I go downstairs, unlock the door, and take the coffee pot outside, where I empty the grounds beside the trunk of a tree that must have died before you moved in, but which I'm hoping to revive with coffee. It might have been a palm tree once, though now it looks like Gandalf's withered staff. What have you taken? What you have taken. I have taken nothing from you. Then I have taken nothing. What have you taken? What you have taken. What have I taken? What you have taken from me. As Chinatown in Jackson Heights is really town-sized, more China-like than China, whose steamed buns assume, whose waving kitties assume, nothing, not of me. So with Liverpool's Chinese lanterns, tree-tangled knots of them, dangling freely outside H&M. They make me think of you. They are not light, but light hosted, shaking.
Now the moment we've all been waiting for. Normally we don't get this at the readings. This is so exciting. Lavinia Greenlaw is now going to make the announcement of the winner. I've got my cup of tea ready to toast the winner. Lavinia.
At times, poetry fills stadiums. At others, it languishes in desk drawers and on library shelves, although most libraries can no longer afford to buy it, placing it even further out of reach. It never disappears. People turn to poetry when language fails them, even if they've never read or written a poem before. Is language not now failing us on a daily basis? The rich variety of the 153 books that we read for this prize shows how poetry has caught up with the profound changes and awakenings we have gone through in the first 20 years of this unsettling century. Poetry doesn't explain or resolve these things, but it gives us a way to inhabit the questions that arise. The best of today's poets are asserting stylistic freedom and new ways of deploying language that enable them to articulate the truth, however unresolved, as well as to interrogate the constructs on which that truth is based. They share a determination and sense of responsibility, drawn from the ways in which the self has been impacted upon and displaced. My fellow judges, Mona Archie, Andrew McMillan, and I were looking for the best poetry we could find. I would like to thank them for their hard work, insight, and integrity, as well as the pleasure of those poetry conversations. We were reading work that had been written in a different pre-pandemic world, and the books that spoke to us were those that could reach across this new divide with the vitality and relevance that all good poetry should contain. These 10 very different books exemplify the ways in which poetry can cast light on what we're only just beginning to see. You will still find the moon, the sea, the sun, and stars in these books, but their metaphorical qualities have been recast. This poetry challenges its readers, but it also leaves us newly equipped as we reconfigure our relationship with our world. Natalie Diaz's post-colonial love poem explores the intersections of nationhood, selfhood, love, erotic, familial, and spiritual, and the very language of survival. Diaz rewrites what cannot be unwritten with technical control matched by ethical determination and imaginative reach. Heightened rhythms of thought and metaphorical high-wire acts articulate the forces of limits and boundary. Sasha Dougdale's Defamations is framed by two powerful sequences drawn from narratives in which art and trauma are inextricable, that of the artist Eric Gill and his abuse of his daughters, and simultaneous fragments from the Odyssey, which amplify moments of impact, of being acted upon. Most remarkable is the point of view, a penetrative eye that counters the unwelcome penetrative action of transgression and subjugation. In Shine, Darling, Ella Frears uses spontaneity as a form of pursuit so that each new thought brings us closer to the core of the experience she describes. Assertive and courageous, this work of self-interrogation looks at responsibility, volition, and desire, and includes a challenging sequence that amplifies the horrifying ordinariness of sexual threat. Rendang by Will Harris explores self-construction and self-awareness and what is imposed on us by others as well as by ourselves. The book shifts between London and Indonesia as Harris steps deftly between the lyrical and the anecdotal, the essayistic and the philosophical, in a compelling investigation that is as literary as it is disruptive. Wayne Holloway Smith's Love Minus Love is fiercely playful in its confrontation of truths that are as familiar and familial as they are painful. How we are always situated in relation, and how we depend on those dynamics, however toxic, to define ourselves. The work traces the erosion of connection between child and parent, meaning and language, body and self. Banu Kapil's How to Wash a Heart brings to mind what Edward Said referred to as the discontinuous state of being of the immigrant. It is related by an immigrant guest who is staying in the home of a citizen host. Her disempowerment can only be countered by freedom of thought, which in turn is compromised by the ongoing cost of survival. In this piercing work, the heart, like its owner, is excised, emblematized, and recast. In Daisy Lafarge's Life Without Air, imperatives are pursued beyond their resources to the point of life without air, including the simultaneous statement and retraction of what needs to be but never will be said. Language reveals its innate conflicts. All this is driven by powerful internal music that integrates seemingly discordant images and ideas into invigorating truths. Glyn Maxwell's How the Hell Are You conjures the future that has already arrived, where truth is a commodity and humans are sidelined, above all by their own failure to care, to pay attention, to act. Renewing ancient forms of fable and song, Maxwell reminds us that the threat we represent to ourselves is also historical and perpetual. This poetry is an urgent call for clear sight and collective responsibility. Shane Mccray's Something I Never Suffered considers the structures we use to gather meaning in the form of heaven, limbo, and hell. It includes a man wandering through the afterlife and arguing back, as well as a fallen angel who has been hastily assembled and is as unsure of his mission as are those who created him. Its finely crafted but perforated lines reflect how we stitch together our never to be completed identities and beliefs. In The Martian's Regress, J.O. Morgan continues his exploration of the long poem to give us a lone Martian on a tragicomic mission back to Earth. Darkly comic and always unsettling, these poems reflect on the natural course of things, just as they hold a mirror up to our contemporary ecological emergency. Remarkable in its world building, this work reflects on what we cannot escape, whatever our capacity for reinvention. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the winner of the 2020 T.S. Eliot Prize is Banu Kapil for How to Wash a Heart. Banu Kapil will now read a poem.
I want to wake up in the arms of the person I love and drink coffee with them on a balcony that opens up to a forest where the moss glows green in the pouring rain. We are both poets, or one of us is. It doesn't matter to me what this person does for a living or who they are inside gender's hall. Light a candle, beloved, and lay me down on the forest floor. Am I your queen?
Congratulations to Banu Kapil. What a fantastic book, a well-deserved winner. Usually at this point, I'll say, let's all go down the bar, let's buy the books, let's queue up and get the poets to sign them. Of course, we can't do any of that now, which is a great shame. But I'd still encourage you to buy the book, either from Foyles or your local bookstore, and then maybe carry the book around with you. So when you see Banu walking down the street, you can get your book signed. That'd be a great thing. My Radio 3 show, The Verb, is doing a special T.S. Eliot edition on Friday night. So I'll see you all there. I'll have the same shirt on because, to be honest with you, times are hard. I'll see you all next year in the flesh. I'll have a different shirt on and we will all be gathered together and we'll say, hey, remember that time we did it on Zoom? That was all right. We enjoyed that. But this, oh, when we're all together, I can't wait. Might even wear the same shirt, actually. I'll see you then.